What's good, everyone? OJ here. Welcome back to another video, and we're going to be talking about Visions of Mana and how it seems to have flopped in the recent Japanese sales, in addition to some more information about the Nintendo Switch 2 that's coming out from reliable sources like Nate the Hate and analyst David Gibson. But before we get into all of that, please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you're someone new, and click that notification bell. Now let's go ahead and jump right into it here. We're starting off with the Famitsu sales for August 26, 2024 through September 1st, 2024, and it shows a pretty bleak opening for Visions of Mana on the PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, Xbox series of systems. Now you have to remember this is all physical sales, not digital, but Japan is still very much physical overall, and we do have a comparison to Trials of Mana, the remake of the Super Nintendo game Seiken Densetsu 3, and even if you compare those sales from 4 years ago, it's not looking good at all. There's definitely some issues and probably a big mistake on Square Enix's part with this game. So let's get into what happened here. So Visions of Mana debuted at 30,696 units on the PlayStation 5 and 10,068 units on the PlayStation 4 for an opening total of 40,764 retail copies. The Xbox version did not chart in the top 10, but we're gonna have to wait and see if it charts in the top 30 or so, which we'll get those numbers later down the line. And kind of put into perspective how poorly Visions of Mana did at launch here in Japan, Game Data Library compiled the sales of all of the previous Mana games, and they stated that retail launch sales of Visions of Mana in Japan are the second worst launch of the series, only above Heroes of Mana on the Nintendo DS. That's nearly 1/4 of what the Trials of Mana remake did at launch back in 2020. And you're looking through here, it's kind of crazy to see how well the games did on the Super Nintendo, on the Super Famicom in Japan. You have 513,000 units back in 1993, and then in 1995, 358,000 units plus. But then also the PS1 game, Legend of Mana, did 432,000 units, and it was pretty much kind of all downhill from there once they went to Sword of Mana on the GBA. Once they went over to the portables, that's when things just kind of took a turn for the worse. But even Dawn of Mana did 169,000 on the PlayStation 2, and those games weren't that great overall. So yeah, definitely not looking good when it comes to the Mana series going forward. Now the big thing here is Visions of Mana and what happened. Can you say, okay, well, there was a packed week? Well, maybe. Gundam Breaker came out, that sold almost 100,000 units across all the different platforms that it was on. But one of the key things is that it was on the Nintendo Switch, and the Switch version was the highest selling copy for the past Famitsu sales week, in the same week here as Visions of Mana, with over 52,000 units on the Nintendo Switch version of the game, which Gundam used to always do better on PlayStation. But now you see the shift, obviously the massive install base difference with the Nintendo Switch over PlayStation, and you're seeing why a lot of these games that were PlayStation only or just didn't come to Nintendo platforms before in Japan are now coming to the Nintendo Switch, despite getting some downgrades here and there. And I think that that is absolutely a factor in this. If you look at it overall, the Nintendo Switch's massive install base of over 30 million plus is hard to ignore. In addition to factoring in Trials of Mana and the Mana Collection being games that sold best on Nintendo platforms, the Nintendo Switch in particular, I think that not having a Switch version absolutely cut into the sales of this game, and maybe even just the notoriety, because the game was announced at Nintendo's presentations and shown off multiple times and different things. So that could have been it as well. I'm not really sure exactly what happened. It's probably a combination of things, because even if you look at the PS5 and PS4 version, it's not like those did as good as Trials of Mana, that's selling 80,000 units on the PlayStation 4 4 years ago. Some people have stated that they didn't advertise the game as much, and once again, these are all factors that probably played a part. And I think that if maybe they did have a Switch version of the game, if they prioritized that, because there is a PS4 version, so they absolutely could have taken that PS4 version and ported it, or at least did the best that they could, I think that you probably would have had a little bit better results here, but I don't know if it would have been better. I don't think it would have been better than Trials of Mana and kind of what happened there, that being a remake of a beloved game overall, whereas this one is a newer game. So not really sure what happened there, guys. It kind of sucks to see that. We know that NetEase has pretty much shuttered the studio, Oka Studios. Like, they've let go of most people there. There's been no official announcement, but word is coming out of there that, yeah, they did that. Square Enix funded the game overall. They didn't necessarily use a bunch of their developers, so we'll have to wait and see what the future of the Mana series is, because they took a lot of time and effort to bring this back. They listened to the fans and said, hey, we know you guys want Mana back, and then for this to happen, it kind of shows, wait a minute, do you actually want Mana back? I bet that's what Square Enix is thinking. Wait a minute, should we have even done this in the first place? But omitting the Nintendo Switch, I think, was probably one of the key factors among many other things that we also discussed. Now, there was some talk about there potentially being a Nintendo Switch 2 version of Visions of Mana, but I just don't know. Overall, when it comes down to it, usually what you'd see is you'd like to see, like, oh, the game did good on PlayStation and Xbox, and then later you get a Switch version of the game because of the momentum. People want to play portable, all of that, but there's no momentum. Obviously, Oka Studios, which might have not done the port, I don't think it was reliant on them still being around. There's just nothing there at this point. There's no momentum. There's no people talking about it. The sales in Japan were lackluster, to say the least. I'm guessing here in the US, they're probably not as good. Usually what happens in Japan, it's a good kind of telling when it comes to Japanese games, what's going to happen in the West as well. So I'm guessing this game isn't really going to chart high like in the UK charts or in the European charts or anything like that. There's also unfamiliarity with Mana overall on non-Nintendo platforms too, so I think that also played a factor into it. So there's so many different things that you can look at overall, but yeah, selling 100,000 units less than a remake of a game is absolutely not what you're looking for overall. I think they would have even been happy if they got like 60, 70, 80k plus, but yeah, having only 40k, that's definitely not a good opening compared to the 150,000 you did 4 years ago. Another thing to note, guys, is that there still really could be a Nintendo Switch 2 version, and they were planning it for there. So just keep that in mind. I know that, yeah, maybe it would have been good to start the development and plan it for the Switch 1 and then have a Switch 2 version available too, but there still could be that. So we just have to kind of wait and see with it, but already the damage is kind of done, and you won't be able to take advantage of that Nintendo Switch massive install base from the beginning, because the Switch 2 install base is not going to be anywhere near as big as the Nintendo Switch's install base anytime soon. I also want to add in here, just on the hardware side, when it comes to Nintendo Switch, it did sell 63,000 units, while the PS5 sold around 33,000 units, and the Xbox Series sold around 778 units, and the PS4 still hanging in there, 91 units. It was funny because there was some articles or there's some stuff that people were saying, oh, well, the Xbox Series got a huge boost because the PS5 got a price increase, so it boosted the sales by a lot. Well, it's 778 units, which I think last week they sold like 200 something units. So there was your massive boost for the Xbox in Japan overall. But what do you guys think when it comes down to Visions of Mana? What do you feel was the biggest issue with the game? Let me know in the comment section. We are going to move on to some Nintendo Switch 2 stuff coming from Nate the Hate, which he stated that there will be backwards compatibility with the Nintendo Switch 2, which in my opinion was always going to happen. We did have a few people kind of come up and say, wait a minute, no, they're not going to because of X, Y, and Z. Shout outs to my good friend MVG of the Spawncast, MVG Modern Vintage Gamer. He made a video just questioning how they'd be able to get it done, and people kind of referenced that video. He wasn't saying that it wasn't going to happen. He essentially was just saying it's not something that's a foregone conclusion. It's not guaranteed because of this thing and that thing development wise with the Nintendo Switch and moving to a new system. But he never said that it wasn't going to happen. But some people took that and was using it as ammunition, and why this is even a story in the first place, right? Because people were using that as ammunition. And it's not just him though. People were also taking the fact that the Wii U to the Nintendo Switch, there was no backwards compatibility, and Nintendo made so much money off of porting Wii U games to the Nintendo Switch that, hey, look, they're going to be greedy about it, and they didn't have backwards compatibility with the Wii U to the Switch, so therefore it's going to happen again, you know? And the problem with that is there's a couple different things here. One, Nintendo's done backwards compatibility multiple times outside of, obviously, they can't take a Wii U disc and somehow shove that into a cartridge-based system. It would have made it way too big, and a spinning disc in a system just doesn't work like that. Two, they also completely changed the architecture, going from the PowerPC, that what they were doing with the Wii U, to the NVIDIA and mobile architecture with the Tegra X1 on the Switch. So that's the biggest reason why, but they've done backwards compatibility before. If you look at the Game Boy, to the Game Boy Color, to the Game Boy Advance, to the DS, to the 3DS. If you look at the GameCube to the Wii, backwards compatibility there. You look at the Wii to the Wii U. So there's been multiple systems where Nintendo does get backwards compatibility done. So essentially this was kind of born out of a little bit from that video, but a lot of people just not looking past the Wii U to the Switch. It's obviously way in their favor to have backwards compatibility. Believe it or not, you don't want to be sitting there and spending a bazillion dollars taking every game and trying to remaster, import it. That's too much time and resources from Switch 1 to Switch 2. And out of all the companies, Microsoft, Sony, Nintendo, every single company, third parties, nobody does a better job at selling first party evergreen titles than Nintendo. They absolutely want you, if you have a Switch 2, to say, okay, I'm going to go back and buy X, Y, and Z game that I didn't play on the Switch 1, or if I didn't have the system, I have an instant library to go back and play Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom, and they can release patches or an update or whatever the case is. But a lot of these games, they're not going to get them, but you can still play the game and buy it. So like, let's just say Kirby and the Forgotten Land, for example, they're not probably going to release any update for that, but you can just go buy the game, play it on your Nintendo Switch 2. Nintendo wants that. They did that before many times. DS, 3DS, so many times they did that, where people were buying the previous generation games on the new system, and it's benefited them. So that's actually more of a benefit to have those games available instead of having to worry about porting over everything like they did from the Wii U to the Nintendo Switch, which they didn't even port over everything. There's still a number of games, but there's a lot of titles that they did have to port over. But once again, it's a failed system. You're changing architecture, you're changing the way that the system even operates, the form factor. There's so many different things, whereas the Switch 1 to the Switch 2 is going to be more of an iterative thing. I think it's going to be more of a DS to 3DS. Big power bump, new little gimmick that you got there, but a lot of the things are going to be what you know and love about that previous system, and they're just going to make it better based off of the reports and based off of what we know so far. So I do think that it really wasn't a situation or a problem that was going to happen. But Nate the Hate did say on Reddit that the Switch 2 will have backwards compatibility, and there's been multiple other information and sources out there that have said that the Switch 2 will have backwards compatibility. So I guess we can lay that to rest right now. But Nintendo even stated in their investor meetings like 4 years ago or so, when it comes to their next system, that they're going to carry over Nintendo accounts, you're going to carry over that relationship with customers. Obviously, that's going to be your digital library, that's going to be your NSOs, so you'd have to find a way to have the backwards compatibility with that. So yeah, that's that. Now let's move on to the next bit of Switch 2 news. Analyst David Gibson, he has talked about this. I've been following Mr. Gibson for a long time, and he gets some things right for sure. And he thinks that the Nintendo Switch 2 will be revealed in September, this month, as of the time that I'm recording, and released in March. And he talked about a manufacturing update, why he's thinking about this. Mr. Gibson on Twitter quote tweeted what Christopher Dring said about hearing some industry whispers about the Switch 2 being revealed this month, and he said, think it might be September 18th to the 26th or in early October to avoid the Tokyo Game Show. So he's not 100% sure on exactly when, but he feels like, hey, it could be September 18th to the 26th or early October. And then he also followed that up with a manufacturing update, because he said no one seems to have noticed the Nintendo assembler Hosiden is spending 2 billion yen on production equipment and 1 billion yen on automation in FY3 2025 for its major customer in amusement, which is confirmed to be Nintendo. So I still expect September news and March 2025 release for the next device. So essentially what he's saying here is that, hey, look, since they're spending all this money, manufacturing is already going. If you're manufacturing at this point, you can expect it to be 5 to 6 months after the manufacturing is starting. So that's why he's anticipating a March release. So if he's stating that the manufacturing is happening at this point, he fully expects it to be something to where it's going to be anywhere between a 6 to 7 month release from when that big manufacturing starts. And it lines up completely. If you look at it, September, October, November, December, January, February, March, 6 months on the dot at this point. And that was very similar to what we saw with the Nintendo Switch and when manufacturing could have started, and the distance between the announcements seemed to all line up very much similarly here. So I think that's what's going on with the Nintendo Switch 2. I do think that there still is an opportunity or chance that the Switch 2 could be later in 2025. Once again, it's just a prediction based off of the manufacturing. But I do think that it's definitely possible that it is March or it is April or something very early, right, when it comes to the year, or first quarter, or right after that first quarter. There's been some talk that it could be later in the year, maybe even late 2024, which once again could still happen, but we'll just have to wait and see overall. But yeah, look at this big manufacturing spend. Something massive is going down, and obviously it's the Nintendo Switch 2. It's just going to be a matter of how Nintendo decides to announce the system and how they decide to roll things out and the games and all that good stuff. So it's exciting nonetheless. So what are your thoughts overall, guys, when it comes to the Nintendo Switch 2 stuff and of course Visions of Mana? Let me know in the comment section below. All right, guys, that wraps it up for this video here. Thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate it. Please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you're someone new, click that notification bell, and check out my other Nintendo Switch and RPG videos right here on screen. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you guys for the next one. Peace.